Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla.
Hello and welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. Today's guest is Claire Gasper, accredited practicing dietitian and credentialed eating disorder clinician and mum of two. Claire is the founder of Diet Free Me, where she works as a non-diet dietitian to help people heal their relationship with food and their body. Claire has such a lovely, grounded approach to everything she does, and I am personally constantly learning from her. She really helps her clients to change their whole lives, free from food guilt and body shame. Welcome to the podcast, Claire.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's lovely to be a guest on your podcast.
Oh, I was super excited when you said yes to chatting, because I feel like you have such an interesting insight into some of the challenges that I think a lot of people in our generation are facing. And I'm interested to kind of hear more about the types of things that you do and who you see. And so maybe if you just want to tell me a little bit about the work you do first before we dive any deeper.
Yeah, sure. So I work in private practice. So I have my practice in Borogoon, and we see children, adolescents, and adults who present with different eating disorders or disordered eating, people that have a long history of dieting, trying to lose weight, gaining it back, losing weight, gaining it back, and anyone really who wants to feel happier, feel healthier, and they're done with the diet way of doing things.
Real yo-yo, isn't it? Like that real kind of constantly thinking about it, up, down, focusing. Exhausting.
And it takes up so much space in your brain. That's one of the reasons that people often give for wanting to do this recovery work is they just want to spend less time thinking about food. They've got other priorities in their life, and the time that they're thinking about their calories or feeling guilty about eating some chocolate or thinking about their weight or their shape or any of those things, it's time spent away from something that probably aligns better with their values and with their life.
So interesting. And I wonder if for a lot of us, we almost don't notice it because it has been a constant for lots of people. Do you think that's a fair reflection?
That is, yeah, definitely a fair point. Dieting has become normalized in our society, but it's not normal, if that makes sense. It's another way I guess we could think of it is it's so deeply ingrained that if you are not dieting, if you're not trying to lose weight or get into a smaller size, it almost feels like you're the odd one out. Like everyone else is doing this. Should I be doing this? Am I the wrong person for not trying to be following some sort of different way of eating? And it's a talk for another time, but if we think about this in terms of like our socializing, talking about diets and weight loss is one of the kind of socially acceptable discussion themes for groups of women to talk about. So part of going through this recovery process for some people does mean reevaluating some of the friendships that they've had or some of the social settings that they put themselves in that maybe they don't align with anymore. That is a whole interesting talk for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just kind of raising in my head this idea, or like one of the, I guess, the challenges is that there's a real perception, or maybe previously there has been, that you have to, like there's a real morality associated with it, right? Like you're being good, you're watching what you eat, you're caring for your body, but that isn't necessarily what you're actually doing, is it?
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of moral value attached to not just foods, but also to your way of eating. So we could think about moral value different to say nutritional value. So someone might describe a food as like, oh, that's a good food. Are they meaning good because it's highly nutritious? Are they meaning good because it tastes really yummy? Or do they mean good in a moral sense because that is a food that kind of diet culture labels as acceptable, as okay, as healthy to eat? And for many people, that expression, you are what you eat, actually holds up, that if they eat bad foods, they start to think of themselves as a bad person. So we have to think about shifting the language when it comes to how we talk about foods, because we don't want people to think less of themselves and judge themselves negatively based on the types of foods they eat or their eating pattern.
Yeah, so interesting. It must bring up a whole heap of kind of big things to wade through for clients when you're first meeting them. Would that be fair?
There, I I use the visualization of it being like a box that has been sitting in your shed or your spare room, and over the years you've just kind of dumped stuff in there, and it's to the point where you don't even really know everything that's in the box anymore, and you've carried it from house to house, and so partly what we need to do when starting therapy and starting this recovery process is actually just taking the lid off the box and going, what is in there? You know, rummaging around and almost like cataloging and going, okay, so we can work on this stuff to do with, you know, your relationship with chocolate. We can talk about your experience with growing up in a bigger body as a child. We can talk about this, we can talk about that. So just getting the lay of the land, I suppose, to find out what is there, you know, how much work potentially could we do? But at the end of the day, it does come down to what feels most important for my client.
Yeah.
My job isn't to tell people what they should be doing different or to try and motivate them to change in the direction that I think they should. I am here to support my clients in the way that they need me. But if they don't yet know the support they need or even know the support that is available to them, then I will definitely sort of facilitate that discovery process at the start.
So interesting, isn't it? Because when I do think about that box of memories that perhaps is in the spare room currently, I think there's two clear boxes in mine, and I'm talking literally at this point. Decluttering some of those things actually does feel amazing, doesn't it? Like letting some of those things go, getting rid of them, seeing what's still valuable to you and what isn't. I can imagine there is a real sense of relief and freedom for people who are working with you when they
Yeah.
can put some of those things down.
Freedom is a really beautiful word. Another word that I would use would be liberation.
Yeah.
You know, if diet culture is like that merry-go-round that we're kind of trapped on, it's like finally being able to step off and walk away. And when you first start walking, if you've been on this merry-go-round, you might feel a little dizzy, you might feel like the ground is moving, and actually you might feel better in the short term if you jump back onto the merry-go-round. But you have to trust in yourself that you can get to a better place. Keep walking, and then you can actually go forward with that growth process. There are so many different emotions that can come up for people doing this sort of recovery work. Grief is a strong one too. Grief for perhaps the younger self. I have lost count of the number of times that I've had lovely clients say something like, I wish I could go back, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago to when I was 17, 18, and I thought I was fat. And I wasn't. I wish I could tell that girl, like, that you're beautiful and you're fine just the way you are. You don't have to change your body. So there can be a lot of grief for the years, the decades spent struggling with body image and eating. But it's never too late. My oldest client that I've ever had was a lovely lady in her mid-70s, and she'd had this long history of dieting and feeling dissatisfied with her body, stretching all the way back from her childhood. And she just reached a point where enough was enough. And she put in a good solid 6 months of work, I think. And the progress for her was just life-changing. It literally was life-changing.
That's incredible. And how crazy to think that she spent so much of her life. Like, if you were to add up the hours of kind of the thought and the hate and the loathing and all of those things, like that is not insubstantial, is it?
No, and in the psychology world, there's a thought experiment that can sometimes be useful for clients to do, where they picture themselves at their 80th birthday, and their close friends and their family are there, and someone is giving a speech. And you get the client to picture, what would you like that person to say about you at your 80th birthday in their speech? Do you want them to say, oh, well, Claire was so dedicated to losing weight. She kept up, she committed to that for decades. Do you want them to say, Claire was so disciplined, she never had any cake on her birthday or Christmas time?
Or she was so preoccupied.
Yeah, you want them to say stuff about who you are as a person, and some other things that you've achieved and done in your life. So when we get people to kind of picture the life that they want for themselves, they pretty quickly see that dieting and being trapped on that dieting merry-go-round isn't actually compatible with their values. It doesn't fit into the life they want for themselves.
Oh, so interesting. And I feel like it flows onto multiple kind of different pathways to chat about, but I'll hold myself back and perhaps we can chat in the future about some of the other options. I'm interested to kind of hear a little bit about how you got to this point, and maybe we can start kind of right back at the start. And kind of the entree section that I ask a lot of my guests is around your experience of food and meal times as a kid. What was that like for you growing up?
Yeah. So unsurprising to many people who've come across me, I'm the oldest child, and probably show quite stereotypical traits of being the eldest. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and I lived with them, and I lived with my mum and dad, and our eating was probably fairly typical of many kind of kids growing up in Australia in the 90s, early 2000s. I was in a family where my dad went to work full time, and my mum chose not to return to work after she had us kids. So we had a mum who was at home and very involved in the school, P&C president, and doing or organising in sports and things like that. So there are some key features of my childhood that other kids might not have had. So we always went to school with homemade food. And I'll preface this by saying I'm not passing any judgment on how parents feed their kids or how my mum fed us. Not saying that one way is better than the other, just describing my experience with this. So we would always go to school with a homemade muffin or homemade piece of cake or something like that. And my sister, which we only found out when she was an adult, she used to long for the packaged snacks, like the roll-ups and the little packets of shapes and things that we didn't have in our lunch boxes. And she actually would trade her lovely homemade chocolate slice, for a packaged snack. And my mum was outraged when she found that out. But
I wasn't baking for other children.
yeah. But it meant that we would come home to, afternoon tea was always like some fruit or something that mum had made or baked. And I very, very clearly have developed my love of baking, my interest in preparing food and cooking from my mum. I have very fond memories of baking with her and learning how to use the mixers and do the measuring, and she was very patient with that, probably far more patient than I am with my two kids when we're baking. And we were a typical kind of meat and veg type family, meat and veg potato, or maybe spaghetti bolognese. As we got older, we had some more adventurous, you could call them, dishes, but there was still the pretty standard kind of Aussie versions of tacos and spaghetti bolognese and sausages and just usual kind of family meals, I suppose. We did have quite a few rules, I guess, around eating that weren't communicated as a rule, but it was something that was understood, implicitly applied or sometimes explicitly applied. So examples of this were in the school holidays. Mum would buy for us one box of what she would sort of consider like a treat cereal. So Cocoa Pops or Fruit Loops or something like that. Whereas normally it would be Wheat Bix or like All Bran or something in the house. So we get one box of treat cereal, and we would get one jar of Nutella, or for a while there, they released the Milky Way spread, which
I remember.
Delicious. Oh my God, delicious. So we get one jar of Nutella, one box of cereal for the school holidays.
And is this between 3 people? So this is to share.
Yes, so this is between the 3 of us siblings. And my mother's expression was, when it's gone, it's gone. As in, you're getting one box, one tub of Nutella, that's it. So what that meant, and as a parent, I completely understand that this is mum's way of saying, don't nag me. I'm not gonna buy any more. When it's gone, it's gone. Those weren't foods that she routinely bought for us. She didn't consider them as foods that were okay to eat regularly, more regularly than school holidays. But what it meant was that it created this sense of scarcity. And I talk with my clients a lot about something called scarcity mindset, which is the rarer something is, or the more restricted our access to something is, the more we actually want to eat that food, and the more we want to eat when we do actually eat the food. So this is particularly important in the context of someone who feels addicted to food or who experiences binge eating. Often one of the drivers for that overconsumption is actually that the access to that food is in some way restricted. So for my brother and sister and I, it meant that if one of them was having a Nutella sandwich for morning snack, the other 2 felt like they also had to have Nutella sandwiches because we wanted to get our fair share. We didn't want to miss out. And it meant that we would have big globs of Nutella on our sandwiches. Like it would make me feel quite yucky now to eat that much in one sitting. But again, it was that scarcity mindset of that, wow, we don't normally get Nutella, now we do. John and Grace are having it for their sandwiches, so I better have it too, otherwise I'm going to miss out. And Nutella is one of the foods that, as an adult, for a long time, I wouldn't keep in the house. I was that classic person, just like many of my clients are, that would go, oh, well, it's if I don't have it in the house, then I won't eat it. And then if I did kind of, you can't see this, but I'm doing air quotes, if I did cave.
Always translates well on a podcast. Yep.
Yeah, it really does. If I caved and bought Nutella, like the jar would be gone within a week, if that. So Nutella was one of those foods that I had to go through the process of legalizing in order for it to now be a staple food in my household. So there is always Nutella in my pantry. My kids always have the opportunity to have Nutella as a spread if they want to. Same for me. And I will go through phases where I might have, my favorite is Nutella on toast with fresh sliced strawberries. I love that for breakfast. I might feel like that for a few days, and then I'll go back to feeling like scrambled eggs. Unsurprising to me, but surprising to a lot of people, is that my kids don't actually ask for Nutella that often. I'll, might be, okay, do you want to have toast for breakfast or wheat bix? And, my son, yep, toast. Okay, what would you like on your toast? You can have Vegemite, you can have peanut butter, you can have Nutella. What would you like? And sometimes it's Nutella, often it's peanut butter, that's his favorite. Sometimes it's Vegemite. But Nutella to them, it's just a food. It's a food that they feel calm about, and it's really nothing special. Which is the kind of relationship that I had to work really hard to have. So that, that's one specific kind of thing from my childhood that I see as an example of the own recovery work that I've gone through, but also an example of some of the differences in how I'm feeding my two children compared to how I was fed as a child.
So interesting, isn't it? And I can imagine that a lot of people listening can think of the equivalent. Maybe it is the Nutella, maybe it is that cereal that you just couldn't have in the house. And I definitely see that in my own kids. There are times, I think some of it is that scarcity thing, that there's only so much between the family, so that you have to kind of fight for your bit, even though you don't necessarily want it all then.
Exactly. Yeah. There were so many times where I had a Nutella sandwich for morning tea and I didn't really want it. I just had it because I didn't want to miss out.
Yeah, you didn't want your sister or brother to
take their more than their fair share. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is also a firstborn thing as well, isn't it?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Tell me about then how you got from there to where you are now with the work that you do. Like, I imagine obviously that's quite a long process, I'm guessing, to that point. And I'm interested to hear it and reflect on my own kind of journey on that space. But what's the kind of general pathway that you went from that point where you couldn't have things in the house to where you now help people feel that sense of freedom around food?
Yeah, so I actually went through all of that recovery work by myself without realizing that I was doing recovery work because it was happening at the same time as I was broadening my professional understanding. So I did my bachelor's degree in nutrition, and then I did my postgraduate diploma in dietetics. And back when I did dietetics, which was back in 2012, there was still a really heavy emphasis on body weight and health and BMI, and that there were healthy foods and unhealthy foods, and there was a healthy way of eating, and actually, on reflection, a lot of that unintentionally aligned very closely with diet culture and a lot of the same thinking. There's quite a lot of overlap there. And so I didn't really realize, but as a new grad dietitian, going out into the world, and I went out into private practice, I was essentially kind of repackaging dieting, but I didn't know that that's kind of what I was doing, because, well, I've been to university and been taught these things, and I'm not prescribing a diet. I'm just talking about healthy eating and encouraging people to get to a healthy weight. And but the similarities between that work that I sort of was doing then and the types of thinking that would underpin someone who is dieting, if there were a Venn diagram, they'd almost be completely overlapping. And it wasn't until I attended a workshop in 2014 that I kind of detoured off that fairly traditional dietetic pathway. So Fiona Willer and Fiona Sutherland, who are two personal heroes of mine in my professional life, they were running a non-diet approach for dietitians workshop, which sounded interesting. So I went along, and I felt afterwards how I felt the first time I finished watching The Matrix. Like, that just mind blown, kind of like, wow, this has just made me question everything in a really good way. And the thing that I guess connected to me was that it perfectly explained what I was observing in my work with my clients, which is that on paper, we could find all of these ways to create this magical calorie deficit that was meant to lead to half a kilo to a kilo of weight loss a week, and then we'd reach this BMI point this week, and it all sounded lovely on paper. The reality of that, though, was that it didn't, again, in air quotes, it didn't work. I'd have people where we'd be going through their eating and their movement and going, well, where are we going to cut back? Like, there's nowhere to cut back to create this mythical calorie deficit. Or people where we would cut back, but they wouldn't be losing weight. And me, with my perfectionist traits and my unrelenting standards, would sort of go, well, what am I doing wrong? Clearly, this is supposed to work because this is what we learned at university. It's not working for my clients, so I must be doing something wrong. And then I did the non-diet approach workshop, and it was like, oh, I am part of the problem. And it's not that, I'm doing it wrong. It's that intentional weight loss doesn't work for 95% of the population. It's not just my clients.
Yeah.
And that really set me off on my professional pathway to where I am now as a specialist eating disorder dietitian. So staunchly non-diet, weight inclusive. So that was almost 10 years ago that I did that first workshop. But that workshop not only changed my professional life, it changed my personal life too, because I was learning this new approach that I could take with my clients and applying that approach to my own life at the same time. So I was like a guinea pig, like a test subject for what I was learning. Don't know if that would get ethics approval, that study.
Any good one.
Yeah, the sample size is a little too small. But it actually was, I guess, that having that practical implementation of all of the theory helped solidify the theory, and really, I guess, gave me insight into then the experiences of my clients. You can be a great clinician without any lived experience of the issues that you're supporting your clients with. I know for me, I am a better clinician because of my lived experience, and it allows me to I think, to better empathize with my clients. But I also think it sort of shows them, God, Claire really gets this. When I say I'm struggling with this or I'm having these thoughts, Claire understands. She's been there. Not that my sessions are spent talking about myself, because they're not, but I'm very vocal, about my own recovery through my social media. So anyone who is a client who follows me on my social media would then sort of know a bit more about my personal experience. Of legalizing foods, of stopping weighing myself, stopping measuring my body, actually allowing myself to eat when I feel hungry rather than eating by the clock. All of those things, all of the work that I've done with clients is work that I've had to do for myself.
Which is so interesting, because I think it reflects a lot of my journey in that space as well. And I wonder if we were at the same workshop with the Fionas back in the day. I'm trying to work out which year I did my training, but it really changed the trajectory for me as well. Really thinking about, and I guess in the same way, like me as a dietitian, me personally, a lot of us were attracted to nutrition and dietetics for that sense of like virtue in a way, being able to control things, being able to help people, definitely, but also like this quite prescriptive, do this and this will happen kind of outcome. And to see it, to run, to work with clients, and for it to not work as a formula is, I mean, it's obvious now, because you think like, well, people are living real messy lives that don't, account for every individual and, all of these things that perhaps at the time, as quite young, naive people, we just didn't necessarily know. And I find it very interesting, because that was probably a few years before I had my first daughter, and we have our oldest are the same age. And so I wonder if part of that, I think for me, has really reinforced the learning that I've done, is because I've been very conscious about what types of messages do I want my children to receive, and how do I raise them in a way that is different, and actually tries to protect them from some of these things, but also set them up with the life skills to kind of get to that point. And I wonder if that's a similar experience for you. Mealtimes as a parent.
I guess I think about the lovely adult clients that I see in my practice, but also, my child and adolescent clients. But I think about my adult clients and kind of where they are, and the similarities in their experiences with food and their body growing up. And there are consistent experiences there, that you sort of go, well, yeah, this is a common thing that most of my clients experience this, or most of them were told you have to eat your veggies if you want to have dessert, or your family's worked hard to put food on the table, you can't waste anything, you have to finish your plate, or lots of those things that many of us growing up, might have thought, well, that was perfectly normal. I have a different kind of take on that, in seeing how it partly kind of shapes someone's disordered relationship with food as an adult. Now, I'm in no way saying that every child who was told they had to finish their veggies to get dessert is going to grow up to have disordered eating. not at all. Just that when you can sort of look back, like retrospectively, of those people that do present with challenges, there are commonalities. So I see that in my practice, and those are things that feel really important in terms of the relationship that I want my kids to have with food. also drawing on my own experiences as well, with food, as a child.
How would you describe what you would like their relationship with food to be like?
In one word would be trusting. So I want them to be able to trust their body to tell them what food it needs or wants, how much, when it's had enough, when it needs food, just like they learn to trust, their body to tell them when it needs to go to the toilet or when they're cold. I want there to be that trust, because we are born intuitive eaters. If we think back to when my babies were breastfeeding before they started solids, they had no concept of what the time was, or when they last had a feed, or how many meals their last feed was, or their kilojoule requirements for the day, or they have absolutely no understanding of that. Yet they are perfectly able to communicate their needs for breast milk in a way that allows them to get everything that their little body needs. So if you feed your baby when it needs feeding, and you let it feed for as long as it needs, and that sort of approach, your baby can magically get enough to eat without knowing all of the things. So if babies are born with bodies that can do that, then it means that adults have bodies that have the potential to do that as well.
You got to think about one. Can I interrupt you for one
Yeah,
second?
of course.
You got to think about like the opposite of that. Like a lot of the people that are coming to you, what is a word that describes their relationship with food, do you think, commonly in your practice?
Chaotic
Yeah.
is a word that springs to mind. Distrustful.
Is there a sense of control, like having to control food or control your body?
Yes, definitely. So there's this thinking that unless they are in control of their food, unless they clamp down and they put these kind of restrictions in place, then they're going to overeat, and they're going to overeat to the point that it leads to weight gain. So this all, so often ends up coming back to a fear of gaining weight, or a fear of not losing weight.
Yeah.
So there isn't the trust in their body to communicate its needs when it comes to appetite. And yeah, there isn't that trust, because that kind of mind-body connection has become disrupted through years of dieting. If we didn't have that disruption, then that connection would be wonderfully intact. And it existed before, prior to the disruption from diet culture. We can reconnect. So intuitive eating and becoming an intuitive eater isn't actually about learning something new. It's more about unlearning and then building up that trust again.
Wow. It makes such sense, doesn't it? And it sounds so different, like having a trusting relationship with food versus having a chaotic and controlling relationship with food. Like one of them makes you just kind of like sigh of relief, and the other one, like, just you can feel the tenseness and the all of the challenges that come with it. Yeah, so interesting. I feel like I've said that about 45 times in this episode already. And we're dealing with it on a daily basis, which doesn't lose any interest, does it? And it's so freeing for people. What about for you guys as a family? Like what works for your kids? What does a typical kind of meal look like for your children in your household?
Yeah, sure. So we breakfast at the moment, both my kids, their parents both work, both kids go to school. They go to before school care and after school care. So in the morning, whether it's me getting them ready, or whether they are with their dad, getting them ready. Mornings are a bit hectic because there's usually, I'm trying to get myself dressed and ready for work, pack lunch boxes, make sure we've got the library books that need returning or not forgetting this thing, get them dressed, get them fed. And so breakfast isn't everyone sits down and has breakfast together event.
Yep.
It certainly was when I wasn't working and when the kids were younger. Now it actually works better to be a little more flexible. And I think of our mornings as more like a morning kind of rhythm than having to have a routine for the mornings. And that allows us to sort of roll with things a little more easily than having a kind of an inflexibility that doesn't account for things being a little different on different days. Sometimes my daughter wakes up and she's in a really chirpy mood and she wants to get herself dressed and she wants to get her own cereal and pour the milk, and that's fine. I can let her do that. She's 6. Other mornings she doesn't want to get out of bed and she's feeling a little grumpy, and then I might have to help her get dressed, and she might want to watch TV, and we in our house, for the mornings, we sort of talk about watching TV can sometimes make it hard to listen to your tummy. So we choose not to put the TV on until the kids have gotten dressed for school and they've had enough food for the tummy to feel happy. So there's not a requirement in terms of how much food they have to eat. The how much is entirely up to them. The if and the how much is up to them, but we offer breakfast and give them the opportunity to eat enough of the breakfast that they need, as well as get dressed before we then put the TV on. Just because, TV can, for some people, be a bit distracting, which can be useful in some situations, but not in the situation that we're talking about. So breakfast is, a little more flexible.
I love though that is, I think lots of people like to hear that it doesn't have to be perfect ever. I mean, eating in general, but that family meals or sitting down together isn't something that is a mandate that you have to do in a certain way when it doesn't work for you. And I think that kind of nicely reflects some of the rigid beliefs we have about food and nutrition as well, right? That sure, we can make some recommendations and like there are real benefits from family meals, but you don't have to do it all the time or at times that don't work for your family or that make life harder. It's never about having to do something.
Definitely. And, the more we're learning about how neurodivergent kiddos may have different requirements in terms of how a mealtime is set up, the more we're sort of really understanding that need to do what works best for your family rather than what's presented as the ideal. When it comes to our evening meal, so usually it's either myself picking them up from school or their dad will pick them up from school. They do have a snack at after school care, but they're often hungry for another snack. So we might offer them something when they get home. And then we do eat dinner together as a family. And dinner is an opportunity for us to catch up on the day. So we play, we call it a game. It's not really a game, but which is favourite thing. So I think this probably got the name probably from Bluey. There probably was Bluey episode where they talk about their favourite thing, and I think Bingo gets a bit upset because she thinks Bluey's laughing at her. And anyway, we're big Bluey fans in our house. So favourite thing, we just sort of go around and each person says what their favourite thing was from the day, which is a nice way for me to learn about their day, but I do it as well, and their dad does it. And it's a moment for me to think about my day and things that I'm grateful for, and reflect on some positive things, especially if I've had a maybe more challenging day. And meal times, we kind of follow that parent provide, child decide rule of thumb. So we will offer food, some foods, some components of that we know that they will, feel comfortable with, that they would think of more as a safe food. And if they just want to eat that safe food and not eat some of the more challenging foods or the maybe foods, that is their choice. My 4-year-old at the moment is going through a stage where he really only likes to eat toast and pasta and rice and cheese and milk and tomato sauce and mayonnaise. Oh, and fruit. Fruit. So we sort of build meals around, okay, well, we do some pasta dishes, we do some rice dishes. If it's a dish that has maybe a different grain component to it, we might offer him some toast to go with the meal. I'll usually provide some fruit or something as well that they can have at the meal time, offer them something to drink, which could be some milk or some water. Sometimes they're offered orange juice to drink. And we are big on letting the kids serve themselves. They're at an age where that feels appropriate and it feels safe. Sometimes they need assistance, but mostly they're pretty good at doing that themselves. So they can pick what of the different components they choose to eat and how much. And we trust them to tell us when they have had enough. We sometimes offer what we call second part of dinner. So we don't use the word dessert in our house. We talk about first part of dinner and then second part of dinner, because we want ice cream or custard, or sometimes it's cake or chocolate, to be thought of as, nothing special. It's not putting food on a pedestal. It's just another part of what is our overall meal. And we happen to split it into 2 parts just because, the ice cream would probably melt if they were having ice cream and their other foods all in one go. So sometimes they have second part of dinner, sometimes they don't. If they ask and it's not a night where they're offering second part of dinner, we'll just calmly say, no, we're not having second part of dinner tonight. We don't need to offer an explanation for them. There's no schedule to that. So it's not like every Monday night they get second part of dinner. We keep it random. But I would say on average in a week, they're offered second part of dinner maybe 3 or 4 times. So roughly every second day, but it's not in any sort of consistent schedule or not. A big difference to how I was raised with my in my family growing up is they don't need to eat a certain amount of any particular component of first part of dinner in order to be able to eat second part of dinner. So if my son chooses to just eat pasta with grated cheese and tomato sauce and not have the pasta sauce that we've made to go alongside it, if he chooses to just eat that, that's okay. He is still offered second part of dinner. If my daughter refuses to eat anything of first part of dinner, there is a backup option that is offered. So the kids know that if there's nothing of first part of dinner that they want to eat, the other option is that they can have some Weet Bix. Weet Bix is a pretty safe food in our house. Not particularly exciting for them, but it means that if they're hungry and they just genuinely don't feel like any of the food that we've offered, there is the option of having Weet Bix. And
how often do you think Weet Bix would be a fallback for you guys?
Yeah, so Weet Bix is it's something that's offered at at breakfast time, or if we're having like a night where we really can't be bothered cooking, or sometimes we may just have what we call pick and scratch, which is just finding different bits and things, and sometimes
Pick and scratch. I love that.
I picture like chickens, maybe.
Yes,
like
I've seen chickens
yeah,
through the wheat bix with their little claws.
yeah. So wheat bix is sort of okay, if you don't want to have anything of what's on offer, you can have wheat bix, or you can have nothing.
Yeah.
And then second part of dinner, and our kiddos go to bed not that long after finishing dinner and second part of dinner, so they usually go off without needing a snack. But if it's a night where they're having trouble going to sleep and it is getting sort of a little way after when we've had some food last, then I will offer them a snack or something to just help their tummies feel comfortable.
There's a lot of trust in what you talk about there. I think you use the word trust quite a few times as well, which is, reflective of what you were talking about with that relationship. And it does take a lot of trust from us as the caregiver, doesn't it, to then support them to trust their bodies and trust the process and trust what we're doing. It does, which can be very difficult if we have spent a lifetime distrusting food or thinking that it needs to be something to control. And I guess jumping ahead to the next section, I find that it's something that really starts to come up for people when you do start feeding your own children. And I think it's definitely something that kind of starts for a lot of my baby mealtimes members, and it kind of progresses. And often that's where I'm linking people to some of your work. But it really does, having kids really does make you reflect on some of the things that you believe about food and bodies, and some of the things that you maybe don't want to pass on to your children. I find that there's a big part where that starts. Would you say that's true in the people that you see? Are there a lot of people realizing that from kind of having to navigate some of this stuff?
Definitely. I think that could probably sum up the experience of a lot of us millennial parents, is that we are kind of going through this process of reflecting on our own parenting whilst then figuring out how we want to parent our little ones. And that can bring up quite a few things for people, realizing that they might have liked things to have been done differently, or that they don't feel like they have a healthy relationship with food or their body, and they're worried about whether they have the capacity currently to model a healthy relationship to their kids. So a lot of the time, it's not until parenthood comes along as sort of like this catalyst for people to reflect, and eating and body image is one of the main points of reflection. So I do get a lot of parents come to me who talk about, I don't want my daughter to grow up hating her body like I do, or I don't want my son to feel ashamed for eating chocolate and hide it in his room like I did. So that that is such a beautiful intention, an intention to break the cycle, to do things differently for your children, and it's an opportunity then for you to do the work for yourself, and that's going to have positive benefits for you and for them.
How challenging is it for people to unlearn some of the stuff that they have picked up and put into that box over the years?
It can be incredibly challenging. Every client that I have the privilege of working with comes with their unique life challenges and experiences, personality traits, temperament, lifestyle, everything. There are some common themes though, and one of the biggest challenges is that we still live in a society that is inherently fat phobic, We exist in a medical system that is still heavily weight biased. You only have to look at the rhetoric around school lunchboxes and, you and I were talking before about the canteen traffic light system and those sorts of things that exist in the environment that we are exposed to on a daily basis. So as much progress as we might sort of make progress in the relative safety of our therapy space, as soon as that client steps foot out the building, they are then going to be exposed to all of this messaging that counteracts what they are doing in their therapy sessions. So part of this unlearning is actually about being able to resist the pressure that's out there from diet culture, but it is a constant pressure and resistance is tiring. So people will talk about, not being able to unsee what they now see. And, if I go back to the Matrix, it's sort of like, they've taken what was it, the red pill or the blue pill? Can't remember whatever color pill it is. And then they've unplugged from the Matrix and now they can't, unknow what they know. Once you start seeing diet culture and you start seeing it for what it really is, it's everywhere. And it's almost like this, wow, it's so pervasive. And that can be a little disheartening at times, but
Yes, even for us.
even for us, exactly. Even as a clinician, I sometimes think, oh my God, am I really helping in any way? Am I really making a difference?
And diet culture, in a way, is quite like it's evolving constantly, trying to stay relevant and fresh, right? It is that sheep in wolf's clothing. No, wolf in sheep's clothing. What's the term? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but it's
wolf in sheep's
constantly
clothing.
becoming, then it was healthy eating for a while, and then it's kind of becoming a little bit of this intolerance, people thinking that actually it's healthier to do certain things, but that is actually diet culture in disguise for lots of people, and not discounting true intolerances and allergies, obviously. But a lot of those kind of things that we're sold or told are diet culture in disguise.
Oh, 100%. And even diets themselves, like there are only 3 macronutrients that make up food: fats, protein, and carbohydrates. So there's a finite number of combinations of those 3 macronutrients in terms of high fat, low carb, or low fat, medium carb. So there is a limited number of combinations.
And even they're becoming disguised, right? Like low carbohydrate, all of this glucose goddess stuff that's happening at the moment. We talked about that on the podcast last week, but that is just low carb diet, another jacket.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, if you look back at it, it's almost like funny how glaringly opposite it is that diet culture is doing this. But every 10 years or so, there's a new bright, shiny, repackaged low carb diet. So, we've been through like keto, and before keto, it was paleo, and before paleo, we had Atkins. And it's like, okay, well, we can predict almost when the next low carb offering will come, because it does seem to cycle like every sort of 10 years or so. And it's the same thing, like there's nothing special. Diets work, again in air quotes, they work all the same way. So if someone is thinking, oh, I just have to find the right diet, that is a fool's errand, I'm afraid to say, because they all work in the same way. They all fail
in the same way. Yeah, true.
They fail in the same way. Yeah.
Oh, big stuff. I hope this has really given some people some light bulb moments at home, just a different rhetoric than what's kind of constantly given to us by, the world that is saturated in diet culture. Really. How can I actually want to ask you a couple of specific things about yourself first, and then we can I can direct people to find you. Something I ask all of my podcast guests at the end is, what is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Unrelated to dieting. Or maybe it is related to
Oh.
dieting. Who knows?
The weirdest thing I've ever eaten. See, I say weird, and I know that for a lot of cultures it wouldn't be weird, but fried grasshoppers. I ate that
Ah,
one time at it was like a tapas restaurant in Highgate. It's probably still there. And yeah, I was feeling particularly adventurous and tried some fried grasshoppers, which I don't think I'd do again, but I'm impressed by my adventurousness at that
I
point.
am impressed. Crispy? Yes.
Yes, crunchy and sort of nutty. But this is going to sound, bits got stuck in my teeth, and I did not do well with that from a sensory point of
I
view.
can just like feel a leg stuck in my
Oh,
tooth
I
like that.
know.
Yeah.
I know. It was like okay, good. Yeah, I did that. Woo me, but no, not again. Thank you.
And finally, what's for dinner tonight in your household?
Oh, well, dinner tonight in my household, I actually don't know because it's not my night to cook tonight. So,
Woohoo! So whatever's on the table.
so well, yeah, whatever the kids are having, yeah, that's not for me to decide. So, my kids' dad and I, we are separated, but we still live together. We co-parent together,
Yeah.
and he cooks Monday nights and Tuesday nights. I cook Wednesday night and Thursday night. Friday night is always movie night in our house where we get McDonald's. We let the kids just sit on the mat and eat their McDonald's, and we all watch a movie together as a family. And then Saturday night is, usually there's some
Pick and
leftovers or
scratch.
something, and Sunday's pick and scratch. So
Sunday's pick
yeah,
and
I
scratch.
don't actually know what's for dinner tonight. It's a
Oh,
surprise.
surprise. I love it. Tell
Mm.
me if people would like to work with you or find out more about you, where can they find you?
Sure. So I am on Instagram and Facebook. If you search at Diet Free Me, DIETFREEME, and you can also go to dietfreeme.com.au. I am based in Booragoon in Perth in WA, but due to the wonders of telehealth, I'm fortunate enough to have several clients who live interstate, and also a few clients that live in regional WA too. So if you have an internet, compatible tablet or phone or laptop, then you and I can connect. So yeah, you can jump onto my Instagram. I post a lot there about my recovery stuff, tips and helpful things for current clients and people out there who are working on their own diet-free journey, and stuff to do with parenting non-diet kids. And then there's a whole load of information about my practice and what services are available and things on the website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like that was such a deep and interesting and also really insightful chat. And I
You're
hope
so
that it's
welcome.
been good listening for everybody else.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.